dim, dam, dadilam, vacarme, s'en va dans l'oubli éternam. Et Gustave, dom guardiam, dilim, dididididam, lutes sera dodilom, seram. Dim, dim, da, 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 dim, da, 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 dim, da, di, dam. Dim, dim, da, 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 dim, da, 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 dim, da, di, dam. Dans là-haut sera ravi, les toits à ce noir gris fera. Clair, obscur, trouble de rature, trouvera effet. Clair, obscur, bordé aux peintures, trouvera sans elle. Clair, obscur, trouble de rature, trouvera effet. Clair, obscur, bordé aux peintures, trouvera sans elle. Oh, clair, obscur,
Alright, today's video, actually it's not going to be today. I don't know when this video is going to be going up. We're going to be cooking up 2 different tier lists. I do love me some tier list video because we have done a couple of it back in the past. No, it's not going to be reviewing private tier list, but it's going to be my personal tier list ranking. I think I did the last one probably 2 or 3 months back, where we essentially decided like the best light cones to pull in 2025, or like the best units to pull in 2025. This is going to be a very similar situation, right? The best units to pull as of HSR's 2nd anniversary, as well as the best light cones to pull as of the HSR 2nd anniversary. I'm going to split this video into 2. First unit is going to be talking about the units, and then the subsequent unit, we're going to take a look at the light cones itself, right? So, very first thing, I just want to say this entire tier list, I did take a little bit of inspiration after being immersifying myself in the Epic 7 content for the past 2 weeks, right? Because Epic 7 tier lists is not so much like a unit's performance, because if you want to talk about tier lists, for example, I think one of our favorite tiers is going to be Pride. Pride tier list is going to be very heavily considered based on performance, right? Your performance in Pure Vision, your performance in Memory of Chaos, as well as your performance in Apocalypse Shadows. And then to a certain extent, a lot of the units placed over here, they are basically true, right? They are going to be the top of their class for past 3 rotations on average, with numbers to back them up, you know. So in terms of numbers, in terms of like their actual performance in the 3 endgame content HSR, I think these are relatively okay. But one thing that I feel that, you know, I think it deserves a little bit more attention to dive into is basically, should you even pull for a specific unit? And why this is the case is because, generally speaking, at the end of the day, if you were to, for example, pull for a single DPS, right? So let's just talk about, for example, a Forgotten One unit in somewhere, right? Let's just take a look at this right here. If let's just say Boothill, right? He is going to be a tier 0.5 in Apoc Shadows, right? You could say Boothill is going to be a very good pull, especially for players that, you know, they're struggling with Apoc Shadows, right? But generally, if you are going to be pulling for a unit only for a specific content, especially for a game that is Honkai Starbucks, right? Honkai Star Rail, I feel that you might not find as much bang for your buck, because there are really only these 3 endgame contents, period. There's no PvP, there's no like meta changes, there's no RTA, there's no Guild War. It's basically just these 3 endgame content for like the past very long time. And we haven't gotten a 3-team content, which means that it is even more important, right, for now than ever, to really decide, especially if you're a free-to-play or low-spending player, to know which units actually give you the best bang for your buck. Because you guys seen from version 3, I think the power scaling for version 3 has been pretty consistent, right? Even with Castorice introduced, because they, you know, intentionally or unintentionally reduce the synergy with Sunday, such to the point where Castorice as a version 3 DPS, she performs pretty similarly to all of her version 3 DPS counterparts. So for example, if you already have a, let's just say, a DHIL team 1 and a Aglaea team 2, to a certain extent, you probably don't even need Castorice with or without the global passive, right? But the global passive thing is completely out of the way. We are just going to talk about, should you even be pulling for these units since 1.0 all the way going up through to version up until Anaxa, right? So without further ado, Seele. I want to say Seele. Okay, wait, before I even continue, right? Categories are gonna be here as follows. This is a very good pull. It is not a must pull, right? It is not a must pull because no units, especially not a unit in Honkai Star Rail, not a single unit is a must pull, because the content that this game revolves around is not tied to whether or not you can clear endgame content. Alright, even if you can't force yourself to get a maximum of like 36 out of 36 for MOC, 12 out of 12 for Pure Vision or Apoc Shadows, you know, you're still essentially gonna be enjoying to pretty much the entire game's content that they have to offer. Maybe you minus half a pool of one pool kit there, but nothing is a must pool, right? So just to be absolutely clear, skip. Honestly, technically nothing is a must skip. Right, technically nothing is a must skip, right? Because if you really wanted to pull for a single unit or a single light cone because that's your wife or husband, though, up to you, right? Up to you, because no a unit, right? No light cone will break your account, right? Pulling for a unit wouldn't break your account HSR to a certain extent where like your account is literally unplayable. And most of the time when I see people with like actually break accounts, it's not so much just because of units, it's also because they don't play game for like 6 months or they don't farm the tracer to farm a verdict. So there are a multitude of factors to the point where you literally cannot clear anything that the game has to offer, right? So with that sort of being established, let's just jump straight into the starting from 1.0, right? Seele and Jing Yuan. Now, I would say that both of these units, they are technically not really a very skip. And to a certain extent, I would say Seele is part of the very niche category. And the reason why I say it is because she is pretty much one of, if not the only version 1 DPS that with the power of vertical investments onto your supports, be it like Sunday, Tribbie, or whatever, if you wanted to make Seele work, and it's still like a Seele showcase and not like a Lingsha showcase, like a Tribbie showcase, right? You can, but you definitely need to put in the work. So it is very niche, and I would feel that she has one of the more fun mechanics that HSR has to offer, which is gonna be the resurgence, right? And no other unit HSR, they pretty much have something that can match up to this whole resurgence mechanic, which depends on the player. I would say she's very niche, but if you want to make her work, sure, go for it. Oh yeah, by the way, we're not going to be talking about any of the standard 5 stars or the standard 4 stars, right? And also, before we continue, just one last thing. These are just strictly my personal opinions, right? My personal opinions. Take it with your own grain of salt. If I take it with your own research, don't let any content creators tell you who to pull, who not to pull. But these are just going to be my personal recommendation. Because every single time when we do a tier list video, there's not a single tier list video in the world that is like, this is the best tier list I've ever seen, right? That every single tier list will have something to say. So leave it to your own discussions, for your own thoughts, and decide for yourself, right? So that's gonna be Seele. For Jing Yuan, at this point, I would say for the exact same unit that you're gonna be running on Jing Yuan, you're just better off running Aglaea. She basically does everything that Jing Yuan can do, but 10 times better, right? And because she has this exact match of like characteristics of like the team comps, which is basically Sunday, Robin, as well as HweHwe, I find it very difficult to recommend anyone still going for Jing Yuan when Aglaea is like a potential option going forward in the future, right? So me personally, I'm gonna, you can get her from 50-50 loss though. I'm gonna take that out of the equation. Silverwolf. Okay, this one is gonna be quite interesting because we know for a fact that some units in HSR, they are gonna be getting buffed. We don't know what the buffs are, so we know for a fact that these 4 units, Silverwolf, Kafka, Blade, Jingliu, they are all getting buffed, right? Not Stellar Hunters, because Firefly is not getting buffed, right? So honestly, for Silverwolf, it really depends on what the buff looks like, and I'm gonna be cautious about it, right? I'm going to be cautious about it because one of Silverwolf's main mechanic essentially is fundamentally tied to your weakness implants, right? Which is something that we are sort of getting with Anaxa, granting that Anaxa is implanting weakness without a 20% rest down, unless you get E2 Anaxa. So to that extent, depending on what the buff has to offer for Silverwolf, whether be it, do they give her more debuffs, do they give her more like maybe like AoE, because that's one of Silverwolf's greatest weakness, her energy rotation for the ultimate, because if you don't get the E1, if you don't have the event like cone, which everybody should get an event like cone, you're going to be getting 4-turn ultimates, which is like very uncomfortable. So to that extent, I feel I'll just add another column. So all the units that are getting buffed, I honestly can't make a proper recommendations until we see what the buffs look like, right? But if you are like, for example, those early investors, right? You believe in Silverwolf stocks. Sure, you can. If she comes around, you can just get her even before the buff is announced, right? Because the news flash, if you play a gacha game and if you pull for a unit in a gacha game, just because you pull them early doesn't mean you get more, right? You don't get more money by investing in a unit early in the gacha game, right? You don't get like more stellar jades just because you pull Silverwolf early. So honestly, I don't think there's any reason for you to like pull something early, right? This is not investing, this is not the stock market. So I would say just sort of wait and see what the buffs has to offer. Luocha. Okay, I would say that Luocha, me personally, I'm gonna drop in now with very skip, and I don't think anybody should be using their tokens for the Luocha. And the reason why is because in the upcoming banner, and this is assuming that you're gonna pull for somebody, right? That means you're always gonna be looking at opportunity cost. Hyacinth is coming up. Hyacinth is coming up, and she is going to be the unit literally right after Anaxa. And the reason why Luocha has seen a resurgence in terms of his performance for our version 3 DPS is because two of our version 3 DPS, namely Mydei as well as Castorice, they are HP scalers, so they don't care about shield whatsoever. They want as much shield as humanly possible. So technically, Luocha did in fact fill in that niche very, very well. He has a single target, huge amount of heal. The Fugue which actually allows you to heal up over time when any of your teammates attack the enemy. And if you get, I don't know, E1 Luocha for like 20% attack buff with just absolutely fucking nothing for Mydei and Castorice, whatever it is, his usage has definitely went up compared to version 2. Because version 2 is shifted a huge focus into like Xuan, into your Aventurine, to a certain extent even HweHwe, right? But now they're starting to shift back into like abundance healers. So units like Luocha, they have seen an upsurge, especially if you're somebody that have literally no other sustain. You could see that Luocha would perform quite well with either Castorice or Mydei, which are going to be our version 3 DPS. But because we are going to be getting Hyacinth in right after Anaxa, I don't think there's any need to, especially if you haven't already gotten a Luocha. If you already have a Luocha, then you don't need to watch this video anyways, right? Because you already pulled for him, right? These are for people if you're considering whether you should you pull the first place. So reason number one, we are getting Hyacinth. Most likely has already been teased to be paired alongside with Castorice. Most likely going to be with Mydei as well, so we're going to see how that goes. And number two, we have this 4-star unit in Honkai Starbucks known as Gallagher. Gallagher, he single-handedly carried the entire 4-star sustain category on his ass shoulders, right? He absolutely sustains pretty much every single team. Reminds me very similarly to how Babin in version 2, she basically carried almost every single version 2. You have any like zero cycle teams, fast kill teams, DPS team, hyper carry, you pretty much seen Babin everywhere. Same thing for Gallagher, he can pretty much be that guy when it comes to sustain. It's literally sustains better than like my 5-stars and like Bailu. So I would say because of these two reasons, Luocha's competition is very, very high, and I don't really find too much of a value if you want to put for him as of this day in 2025 after having Honkai Starbucks secondary. And Blade, same reason for Silverwolf, same thing for Kafka. So I'm just going to be chugging them, both of them, with the 3 of them. The Stellar Hunters, they're all getting buffed, and one more is going to be Jing Yuan over here. So all these 4 units, I will wait and see what the actual buffs are going to look like before making a judgment. Keep in mind though, some of these units you see over here, specifically Scylla, Blade, as well as Xuan, you can technically get them from losing your 50-50, but it is technically you need to lose your 50-50. So by that sense, it's not really guaranteed, and don't even know if they're ever going to be getting a rerun, because if they're already in the 50-50 pool, there might be a chance that they just don't ever get a rerun ever again. So to each their own, just a little bit of a thought process. Okay, DHIL, Imbibitor Lune. I have the absolute history when it comes to Imbibitor Lune. I've been using him pretty much ever since he launched. Instantly got his E2 because I knew for a fact the moment I saw his E2, I know that's completely bastard. And to this day, I would say that E2 DHIL, he's still more or less able to perform exceptionally well, at least in Memory of Chaos. To a certain extent, Epoch Shadows, right, as well as Pure Fiction, if you give him the proper teams and tools to work with. But I would say that at E0, cost for cost, it is a little bit unfortunate, right? Cost for cost is just a little bit unfortunate because you're literally investing the same amount of things you would get an E2 DHIL. For the exact same E2 DHIL, you're getting an E2 Herta. You're getting an E2 Castorice. Fuck it, you could literally get an E1 Mydei, which is like absolutely fucking ridiculous. So I would say that as of this point of time, if you are thinking about vertical investments or like specifically like imaginary DPS, it's just not that great, right? It's just not that great. That's gonna be that. Xuan, okay, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I think she's our first good pool. She might not work that well with the version 3 DPS, specifically Castorice and Mydei, but I feel like her support, or rather her sustain capabilities are unmatched, right? She is very, very comfortable, and she is actually able to be in your 50-50 summons. Yeah, as in like if you were to lose a 50-50, you could potentially get a Fusion, which I think is absolutely fucking insane. That this good of a sustain is gonna be part of the 50 pool. So do know that she is part. You can choose her to lose your 50-52 in the limited summon, right? So there's a potential chance you could get a wild Fusion, but in the event that you're still lacking the tools to sustain properly, right? I feel like Fusion, even considering like Aventurine, considering HweHwe, considering maybe Hyacinth, she is still one of, if not the best sustains, strictly when it comes to players that are having a problem sustaining their endgame content, right? And that's of course assuming that you're not making use of things like for example, global passive, right? You're not making this kind of heal down. Then Fusion is gonna, I feel that she's very, very comfortable, very, very good at the job that she's doing. Sometimes even better than a lot of the other limited sustains, because for example, abundant sustains, one of the weakest down downfall is that you can't really prevent one-shots because your theoretical highest HP is just that. But Fusion is one of those few units at E0, S0, she can do the job exceptionally well. So I would say she's a pretty good pull, but just keep in mind that she is able to appear on a lost 50-50, right? So that's gonna be that. Okay, Topaz, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I don't need her, right? Somewhat of a similar reason. So the main reason you have kind of two routes to go about with Topaz. You either roll main DPS Topaz, literally slap her on with Sunday, like a main DPS Topaz, so main DPS Topaz with Sunday with Babin as well as HweHwe, or you run her with another 4-up team comp, specifically Babin, Feixiao, as well as Aventurine. So these two are like the main sources of where you want to use Topaz. Unfortunately for Topaz, the issue is the first things being as a main DPS with Sunday, right? As a main DPS with Sunday, if you want a summon DPS, right, that synergizes that well, you don't really need to look for any other unit aside from Aglaea. Aglaea has consistently been the fastest clearing hyper carry, especially for somebody that's been running Sunday. She does absolutely exceptional damage. Main reason is just because her team comp has more or less settled down, right? It's finalized, it is basically peaked out, and it is the best thing you're going to be getting up until unless they want to release a replacement for either Robin or HweHwe. Then you can see Aglaea maybe get a little more vertical investment. But as of this point, Aglaea is going to be the game's strongest DPS, one of, if not the strongest DPS, especially at EZO, right? So that is going to be that. And if you want to run a follow-up team, I'm going to keep it about in this current environment right now, HSR, and they have teased this that for the entirety of Amphorius, they're going to be focusing quite heavily on this whole mob content. We might see a bit of a resurgence for single target because Anaxa technically was built with the intention to make Herta's single target value go up a little bit higher because he has bounce, which means that if there are only going to be one target, Anaxa's damage technically can go quite a bit higher, right? So I don't really foresee a world where I would specifically pull Topaz just for the sake of I want to pull Topaz plus Feixiao, right? I'm not going to include the supports and the sustains, but as a DPS standpoint alone, it's either you run her as a main DPS, which I don't think is worth it, or you run her with Feixiao. And at that point, there's going to be two different costs. And for two cost units, I feel like it doesn't really worth it that much for the player base, right? And also, we do have Han March 7. Now, whether or not Han March 7 is better than Topaz, or Topaz is better than Han March 7, especially at E0, S0, without the essential icon or whatever, that's going to be up to you to decide. You can check out my previous video of like Han March 7 versus Topaz. But generally speaking, if a 4-star, like a free 4-star is able to come that close in terms of like utility and damage, or to you as a 5-star unit, where you basically don't really spend a single stellar Jade, I personally don't think she's going to be that worth it, right? That's going to be me personally. So that is going to be that for Topaz. I know this might piss off a lot of people, but you know, one more video about this. Okay, HweHwe. Okay, I'll give her a good pull, right? I feel like HweHwe it can be in a good pull. But just keep in mind why you want to pull for HweHwe in the first place. Because in terms of a sustain right now, she's the only one that can sustain and give energy to an entire team. And she is like a key component for all of our support HweHwe team comp. Specifically, Robin, Sunday, HweHwe, right? These three units, they have formed the backbone of every single old version 1 hyper carry, to a certain extent version 2 DPS, and now even version 3 DPS such as Aglaea, right? And HweHwe, Babin, Sunday, the three of them, they have such a good synergy with one another that you will find extremely good success. As long as you're a hyper carry, you run hyper carry, Sunday hyper carry, this team is pretty much it, right? So in terms of that value from the attack buff is kind of whatever, but the energy regeneration helps you to cycle your Babin, your Sunday, as well as the main DPS a lot smoother, right? And if you want to find like a replacement for HweHwe, you technically can do so with Gallagher by running him either with Shared Feelings or Quid Pro Quo, but it is definitely nowhere near as comfortable as HweHwe. But that being said, if you are pulling HweHwe for the sake of a sustain, right? Like because you are facing difficulties when it comes to can you keep your team alive if you're going to be pulling for HweHwe, I would say tread with caution, right? I would say tread with caution, especially at E0, S0, because HweHwe's sustain, it can be quite questionable because she doesn't prevent the scenarios where you're getting one shot, right? She's one of the only sustains, 5-star sustain, that doesn't have this emergency heal, right? The only 5-star button doesn't have this emergency, like for example, Luocha has an emergency heal, Lingsha has an emergency heal, even Bailu has that fucking emergency revive, but HweHwe is one of the only ones. You technically have an emergency heal in the form where if you have the talent stacks and you cast an ultimate, you heal a little bit, but it's a very small amount. Unless you get the S1, which could be giving you a little bit more comfort, but because she lacks this emergency heal, you might run into scenarios where running another sustain might be easier for you in terms of your sustained pressure. This is out of the equation if you have no problem sustaining whatsoever. You're okay with HweHwe, your damage output is really very high. For example, you really have like an E1 Sunday, E1 Barbarian, right? You just want to tie the whole team together with a sustain. HweHwe is going to be an excellent choice. But really in terms of keeping your team alive, assuming that your damage is lacking and you can't tank all those, like for example, Flame, Reverse, Giant Attack, or like the fucking bug from the Epoch Shadows, the Giant Attack, it might be a little bit scary, right? So that's gonna be that. I still think she is a pretty good pull because, you know, very little people can come close to the utility in terms of the 20% team-wide maximum energy, right? Okay, Argenti, I would say he's very niche. Alright, okay, by the way, these are like in no particular order, right? It's just like the same category, right? This is not better than what it's just a very niche category. The main reason for Argenti is sort of similar to Topaz, where you either run him as a main DPS, right? You could run a main DPS Argenti, which in 2025 is like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? I need to Sarah. Or you can run him as a D Herta bot, right? You can run him with a D Herta bot, can provide him stacks, or could provide her stacks, spam your 90 energy ultimates, especially for content such as Pure Fiction. I think Argenti is still going to be one of, if not the better Pure Fiction DPSs. So that's probably one of the only places where you can shine with Argenti, which also sort of want me to bring back to the whole topic of this tier list, which is like a pool value tier list, right? I personally would never ever feel that a player should pull for this singular unit, this especially a single DPS, just for the sake of performing exceptionally well in a single game mode, right? Because Argenti without D Herta, I don't think it's going to be doing too well in Memory of Chaos as well as Epoch Shadows, especially if you don't have access to any of the other units that can supplement his total damage output, right? So because of this, his value is going to be a lot more dependent on whether D Herta is going to be in your account in the first place. Second reason is because of the substitutes, right? So you have Baby, Herta, and Saval, both of which are free 4 stars, which can achieve very similar, if not potentially even better results if you want to run them as the 4-star battery unit for your D Herta. And we are gonna be getting a Anaxa. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm bumming his ass down here, right? We are gonna be getting a Anaxa very soon. And in every role that you think to yourself, okay, I want to pull for Argenti, you probably can pull for Anaxa. So by that same vein, all of these units, because in 2025, the competition for these kind of like version 3 units are going to be, you know, quite considerable. For a D Herta main such as yourself, like for example, you really have a D Herta, you're thinking, should you be pulling for Anaxa, should you pull for Argenti? Anaxa is definitely going to be holding a lot more value for you as a player, right? And outside from his spot with D Herta, he's basically only relegated Pure Fiction, which I would say this entire game by itself, because of the access to the different buffs, the different mechanics, you don't necessarily even need Argenti that much because you do have quite a lot of different tools which can help you get that 30k score for the clear, right? So that is going to be that very skip, right? So that's gonna be that. Okay, Ruan Mei. She is going to be a good pool. She is going to be a good pool. Maybe back in version 1, she will be in the top of the pool, right? In version 1, she will be in the top of the pool. But I would say that Ruan Mei is a good pool for 2 reasons. One being she is exceptional in break teams. If you are a break team enjoyer, you just pull her, right? If you're a break team enjoyer, you pretty much just get her, and you can in fact literally get a Ruan Mei for $3.99 using the token that they gave out in the second end version. So if you really wanted to play Ruan Mei and you're a break player, so for example, you already pull for Rappa, you pull for Fugue, but you missed out Ruan Mei, just slam it, run a break team, and she's gonna be done, right? But for anyone else, if you do not play break team, right, I would say that Ruan Mei is not going to be that useful for you. You could potentially see some sustainless runs where you run like Ruan Mei as a 3rd slot support, so you run triple support plus 1 DPS, that could still work. Or you run her in content such as Epoch Shadows, because Epoch Shadows is basically all tied to your toughness bar, and it is a pretty prominent content in Honkai Starbucks. So any teams in Epoch with the additional toughness bar efficiency, Ruan Mei can give you quite a bit of value, right? But if you don't play break team, and the reason why this is no longer a very good pool is because we have a shit ton of different teams, and we have not gotten a single super break archetype so far at all, right? It has always been crit DPS, TP DPS, and something tells me that because of this lack of love for super break, which to be fair, we already seen a lot of love for super break in the past almost entire version 2. I think they are basically changing the tempo back into crit DPS, more so focused on Castorice, Mydei, this kind of HweHwe scaling DPS, in which if that is the case, Ruan Mei really doesn't do too much for your account. So if you are, for example, you already got Castorice, right? Your T1 is Castorice, your Team 2 is Herta, I'm gonna keep it about Ruan Mei doesn't do too much for you. Unless you decide to skip Tribbie for Ruan Mei, which is a pretty questionable choice, right? But aside from that, I would say that generally speaking, as long as you are playing break, she's gonna be here. If you don't want to play break, she's still a pretty decent pool. I would say probably not the most important, right? I'm almost even tempted to drop her over here, but I know people are gonna fucking cancel me. So you know what? Just to give her face, I'll leave her on the group pool, right? Okay, Dr. Ratio. I don't think I need to explain anything, right? Bada boom, bada boom, bang, right? Skip, right? Black Swan. Unfortunately, they didn't really say anything about Black Swan getting a buff, but they did show that Kafka is getting a buff. Right, they did show that Kafka is getting buff, and the entire mechanic for Kafka, it is gonna be this archetype and Honkai style, especially a new player. If you've never heard of this thing it's called DOT, right? If you're a new player watching this video, this DOT thing is back in my days. It was like the pinnacle of damage, right? Because DOT was doing so much fucking damage, you know, the Arcana and everything. Oh my god, everybody loves DOT, right? That was back in my days, right? Nowadays, if you just started playing HSR in version 3, you probably don't even know what the fuck is DOT, right? So I would say Black Swan is probably under a very, 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 very niche pool, to the extent where if they buff Kafka to the point where DOT would work exceptionally well, Black Swan herself would technically also get indirectly buffed. So for example, an example I can think of, right? If Kafka's follow-up attack, as well as like another way to trigger more DOTs can happen during a boss fight, Black Swan could potentially stand to gain quite a bit here. Because you trigger more of the Arcana stacks, you can build more of the Arcana stacks. And who is to say Black Swan doesn't get a buff? Because we know these 4 are the first batch to get a buff. So maybe Black Swan could also get a buff. And then if you're a DOT main, maybe in 2026 or 2027, and we know there's going to be a violent physical bleed DOT girl coming out in, I don't know when, it is not going to be the end of DOT. But as of this point right now, I wouldn't say it is going to be that good, but there is a slight prospect in the future where they might make a comeback, right? So that is going to be that for Black Swan. Okay, Sparkle. It's a travesty, right? Honestly, this is a... I mean... we might see a buff. All right, let's just put it. Sparkle is a unit that I say that they killed Sparkle to make Sunday, and then now they are gonna kill Sunday to make 5-star Mimi. That is sort of what I feel this entire situation feels like. Sparkle as a unit is fine, right? She has the skill point, she has the action value advance, but one of the biggest issue with her kit is that her action value advance is 50% instead of 100%. And that poses a significant challenge to speed tuning, because unless you can hit a 200 speed Sparkle, which means you are able to achieve effective 200 speed, most likely with an Eagle 4-piece, to make it such that your DPS is running an attack of HP boots, and then Sparkle is running at 200 speed, your DPS would be an effective 200 speed, right? In this circumstance, Sparkle technically still works, right? Because the buff actually lasts all the way until the start of the unit's next turn. So for units like Mydei, Sparkle technically could work if you could run it like a 200 speed Sparkle, right? The problem is, it's not worth it to build this high of a Reddit quality for Sparkle, because skill point is not something that, for example, Mydei really needs, because Mydei doesn't really give a shit about skill point. She's very, very skill and positive, and for every scenario I can think of, you want to run their Sunday, it is a lot easier to build. You basically just run a 134, 133 DPS in Sunday. He has the energy regeneration. His skill point, if you do not have his Synergy Light Cone, it can be a little bit iffy, but for our most of our modern DPSs nowadays, in version 3, skill point is not that big of a problem, right? Even for like Castorice, which technically is not going to be the best, but skill point is not that big of a problem. So I would say that in this kind of scenarios, unless Sparkle gets a direct buff, which is going to be throwing her in this category, I cannot find a reason to why people want to get her, because every single role that she does, it has been replaced by either Sunday or RMC. So it's just a little bit unfortunate, but that's going to be that. Acheron. I'm going to keep it a buck. I'll park her. Hey, where did she go? I would say she's niche. She's not going to be a good pool. Ooh, war, right? I would say Acheron is it's quite literally the definition of a niche pool. If you were to get Acheron, it means you have the intention of logging into the Acheron archetype. And Acheron archetype is unique only to Acheron. Specifically, how quickly can you generate the buffs or rather the slash dream stacks, as many ultimate as humanly possible, so that your Acheron will do the highest possible amount of damage, right? And this has been for the longest time tied with DHIL. In fact, since Acheron is going to be here, I'm just going to step on DHIL over here, right? These two are basically a package, right? In 2025, you want to play Acheron, you get a DHIL. If you don't want to get a DHIL, you sort of have to wait and see what Cypher does as a kid, right? So there is a potential that Cypher could come into an Acheron support because she's going to be teased as a quantum nihility, right? And even if Cypher is going to be paired with Acheron, who's to say you can't use both Cypher and Acheron and DHIL, all three of them in the same team, right? So because of this, these two units, they are basically pair and pair, right? And this is, in my opinion, the definition of niche, because if you can make this team work, it is technically gonna be worth it for you because she can clear pretty much every single endgame content. She has excellent vertical investment scaling, especially in the E1 as well as the E2, specifically the E2. And there is a prospect that as long as you get brand new nihility units that are more suitable to the content that we're going to be getting right now, or even like a dedicated nihility or an Acheron sustain, her growth looks to be quite prospective, right? So we're going to see what Cypher has to offer, but I don't really know what that kit is. But just for now, just know that this is considered a niche pool because, like I said, for every other unit, it is always going to be about opportunity cost. Now, I'm not saying that Acheron is worse or better than Aglaea or worse than better than Jing Yuan or worse than better than Herta or Castorice, right? But at the end of the day, you cannot deny the fact that all of the endgame content right now, as well as the environment, they are suited towards Castorice and Mydei or all these kind of HweHwe scaling. So Acheron, her unit, she's still very, very strong back last time, but right now in this environment, if you're thinking about pulling for Acheron, you're better off just pulling for Castorice, right? You're gonna have a better time, easier time. Not to say that you can never pull for Acheron, but just in terms of this kind of bang for buck, know that she is considered, in my opinion, a niche unit. I would say if Cypher can drastically upgrade Acheron's value as a DPS, as an archetype. On top of that, if you do pull a Cypher, you can see her in multiple uses outside. We could see a potential where Acheron can jump into good pool, right? But for that, it really depends if we do get the version. It's like a version 3 look for Acheron. Because right now, the Acheron best team, it is still stuck in version 2, and we haven't gotten any other update. A little bit similar to DOT. It has been the same DOT team ever since 2.0, right? So if we get a fresh look for Acheron in the form of Cypher, there is a chance that this can go up. But for now, I'm going to be conservative and leave her under the niche pool, right? Okay, Aventurine. It's gonna be... Any other time, if you don't use Castorice and Mydei, you just slap it on over here, right? He works with everyone. Sort of like Xuan, but could be even better. He technically works with everyone. The only thing you need to be mindful of is that is the 50% effect rest, so he cannot fully stop an enemy crowd control. So you might need to reset, right? Aside from that, his sustain is exceptionally comfortable, and they fixed the Aventurine bug, so his shields are very, very comfy. If you don't want to build a DPS Aventurine, you want to build a tank Aventurine or in shield, I don't think you should have any problem when it comes to sustain. And then he deals a little bit more damage than Fugue, right? But because of the environment that is shifting towards the focus of abundance class sustains, you want to heal your HP, you want to get your team to lose HP, heal HP in Castorice and Mydei, all that kind of stuff. Aventurine is gonna go down over here, right? I don't think he's gonna be that good of a pool anymore, especially when Hyacinth is literally coming out. And as a general rule of thumb for sustains, you really don't need more than 2 sustains, right? You don't need more than 2 limited sustains in your account because like they might not be the best in slot, but if they can get the job done, if you want to deal more damage, most of the time, pulling for an additional support, pulling for a brand new DPS is going to be easier compared if you want to just upgrade your damage or utility in terms of a sustain, right? So because of that, I'll be dropping the good pool. Not really his fault, somewhat similar to like the other units I mentioned, but just because of the environment so far, right? Okay, Babin. Yep, she's still going to be here. I thought that Babin was no longer going to be her anymore, but I'm gonna throw this in with a huge pinch of salt, right? With a huge pinch of salt, right? Huge pinch of salt, right? We see Ruan Mei, and we see Luocha. That is the first batch of potential units you can get in the token, and those two are exceptional units in version 1. So I wouldn't be too surprised if in the future batches, because they did mention that they're gonna add in more units towards the little token shop, right? If you do see Babin in this thingamabobble, I would say she is very, 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 very worth it. And this reason why I would say she's our very, very first, very, very good pool, is also partly tied to Anaxa and Herta, right? Anaxa and DHIL, I'm not sure if you guys have seen the early access video. Anaxa is coming in 2 days. This is a team comp combined with Aglaea. These two DPS in version 3, they can make use of Robin especially well, right? Your Mydei and Castorice, I think there might be a bit of a recency bias. They don't use Babin whatsoever, right? Castorice with Babin or Mydei Babin, it is very, very bad. But every other crit DPS, they are pretty much gonna be using her to a utmost efficiency, especially if you are gonna be running Sunday and HweHwe, right? These 3 units combined to one, that slot over there, it can be a lot of different units. For the Herta, once you get the Anaxa, Robin is an almost equivalent, if not potentially even better upgrade than Tribbie, because Tribbie's energy regeneration, it comes from the number of targets you hit. And if one day MrPokke decides to pivot the endgame content towards a mob-based content into it, like for example single target content, you can no longer gain as much energy for Tribbie's ultimate, which means that frequency of attack, such as for example Anaxa does 1 additional skill, right, which does count as 1 additional frequency, your Robin's ultimate uptime is gonna feel pretty comfortable. On top of this, her vertical investment as a unit is also very, very worth it. E1 Babin, E2 Babin, these two items, while it is technically not a must, it is very, 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 very prospective. So for example, for the price of, let's just say, 2 different DPS, you could just get an E1 Babin, and E1 Babin could make a lot of different DPS work to a huge degree, right? So I would say Babin is still a very, 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 very good pool, unless you are in the camp where you want to all-in Castorice and you are all-in Super Break. Or if you're all-in Mydei and you're all-in Super Break, right? If you're in this camp, you technically would never really need a Babin. To a certain extent, even DOT, you probably won't really need a Babin, because the way I can kind of foresee how DOT is going to shape in the future is they are going to make it such it's going to be triple DOT. I think that's the best way that DOT is going to scale, especially with the violent growth that does a physical bleed DOT. So if we do have a triple DOT and Kafka is the one that triggers, you also don't really find a slot with Babin, right? So in that scenario, you technically don't really need her that much. But taking that away, a lot of the version 3 DPS and a lot of the version 2 DPS, they can still use the Babin exceptionally well. Feixiao as a unit, for example, she's still going to be fine. Yunli as a unit, she's still going to be fine, right? Aglaea, DHIL, all these units can still make use of Babin very, very well. And there really is very little substitute to her role that's performing in HSR. And if you're somebody that cares about sustainless runs, I don't think you'll find a better fit, because Babin is basically the queen of sustainless runs. Every single sustainless run, almost every single sustainless run, you're going to see a Babin there. And also with the brand new global passive, right? If you were going to be playing Castorice, using a global passive tech, Babin can actually die and then cast her ultimate again for a free 3 action again, which is a little bit crazy. So for all those reasons, I might be, you know, you might say she might not be that good. She might be the same category as Ruan Mei. But because I see a lot more potential users for her going forward in the future, I'm going to leave her in a very, very good pool, right? So that's going to be that. Okay, Boothill, Firefly. I'm going to rank all these 3 in the same vein. There's this... Okay, I'm assuming that if you're a player watching my video, you're like a new player, right? Because if you're an old player, you probably won't need to watch this. You probably prefer anyone. There has been this war going on in the HSR community between the Super Breakers. Specifically, Rappa mains and Firefly mains. Boothill mains, they're sort of just chilling, right? Because they're kind of just doing their own thing. He's very, very fun to play with. But Super Break in general, they have been sort of going at it with each other for like war for like a good while now to determine who is the best Super Break DPS in HSR, right? This has been going on for a very long time. And if you're new to the game, no, just don't use Reddit, right? Don't use Reddit, don't use Discord, right? Join my Discord, right? We are very, very chill there. But just stay away from the war. Just ignore those crazy Firefly mains or like Rappa or whatever. But essentially, I would say that the 3 of them, they are very, very similar in the sense where the team building is almost exactly the same. You run a Fugue, you run a Ruan Mei. If you want to run a Sustainers, you run HMC. If you don't run a Sustainers, you run a Lingsha. It's almost the exact same formula for all 3 units. Boothill can potentially go for something a little bit different. For example, you could run like a Sunday with Boothill, give him a little bit more energy and a little bit more turns. Then Boothill himself, he can, you know, sort of like his own vein. But for Rappa and Firefly, they are pretty much running almost the exact same team. So to that extent, if you're already somebody that, let's just say you pull a Firefly, I really cannot recommend anyone else to pull Rappa on top of Firefly, because the whole purpose of the break team is to make this whole archetype of Super Break as accessible as possible to the largest population of the player base within HSR, right? There's a reason why Super Break, even to this day in 2025, it is the most used team of all time in all places, right? everyone in their mouths, more than 80% of the player base, they have used Super Break for every single endgame content. So because of this, it doesn't really make sense if you're a Super Break main, you pull for 2 Super Break DPS because they are all using the same units. Me personally, I would say Boothill, I will park him in the very niche category. This is not bad, by the way. I'm not saying that they are bad units, but Boothill, at the end of the day, he doesn't really do that well in Pure Vision. If you want to make Boothill perform in Pure Vision, like I see in my Pure Vision video, it's going to be a Lingsha showcase, right? And I think that everybody can kind of agree with that. He will perform very, very well in APOC Shadows as well as MOC. But if you are somebody that is lacking a break DPS and you want a break DPS that can technically do pretty decently, right? Or at least a little bit more balanced in all 3 endgame formats, you are probably looking at either Firefly or Rappa, right? So for that, he's still very, very fun, right? You can make him work. He's definitely very fun. But for that reason, I'm going to put him under very niche. Between these 2 units, you know what? I feel like they can go under niche. They can go under niche. I'm going to rank them 1 spot below Ruan Mei, because Ruan Mei is sort of at the core structure to the entire break team. And then either of these 2 units, you honestly can't really go wrong that much. If you want to ask me right now, as of this date, Rappa is going to be more favorable because we are seeing a more focus towards this a mod-based content, right? And Rappa, we have dispelled the myth that she needs a Signature Light Cone. She still performs pretty well. Firefly also performs very well without the Signature Light Cone. So both of them, they are sort of in the same vein, but Firefly does face a little bit more difficulty, especially against Pure Fiction compared to Rappa. So it really depends on how they want to shape up the scenarios for the endgame content going forward, right? Between these 2, you really, really can't go wrong. In terms of vertical investment, however, I would say that E2 Firefly is going to be far, maybe not far, but I would say she's going to feel a lot better to play compared to, for example, like an E2 Rappa, right? Because E2 Firefly, the first E1, you can ignore the skill point problems which you have with E0 Firefly, and then E2 Firefly is E2 Firefly, you got an extra turn, it's going to be very, very comfortable, implant 5 weakness and everything, and yep, you do implant the 5 weakness of a Firefly, which means that if you want to deal toughness bar damage with Lingsha, it's also going to be applied for you, but it will be a little bit more problematic if you want to face up against these mob content, right? So I would say that for these 2, I'm going to stay neutral, right? Whichever one, you can't really go wrong, especially if you really pull for Ruan Mei, especially if you pull for Fugue, right? So that's going to be there for the break DPS. Okay, Jade. Jade, I would say right now she feels very, very good because the content has started to shift towards the mod-based content, right? For Memory of Chaos, for APOC, for Pure Vision, the entire landscape has shifted towards mod-based content. But I still remember back on launch, because it wasn't that focused, especially if you only had like an E0 Jade, it didn't feel that good to play. I probably would still put at niche, right? And the main reason is because you don't really feel that she's a unit that would change your life, whether you had her or don't have her. For Pure Fiction, we have a shit ton of different units that can do pretty well in Pure Fiction. For Memory of Chaos, you can run a lot of different teams in Memory of Chaos even without running Jade. And then APOC Shadows, most of the mode, even if you don't have Jade, it's not going to be the end of the road. Even though right now, in this current format, you'll feel that she's quite nice, right? You have seen a lot of Jade showcase, a lot of stacks getting gotten for example, Flame Weaver, exceptionally good DPS against Flame Weaver. You could see that the Jade wheelchair comp with Jade, Lingsha, and Sunday, very, very fun. But at the end of the day, I feel that she's still more or less like a niche unit. Definitely also a little bit more impacted, especially with the upcoming release of Anaxa. Because at the end of the day, Jade's role, I think she also did get boosted quite a bit with DHIL, albeit it's going to be much, much lesser compared to units like Argenti, right? So if you're a DHIL main and you're thinking, should you be pulling for Jade or should you be pulling for Anaxa? I would say that Anaxa is a unit that makes DHIL's weakness less prominent, because DHIL's weakness is if the content is only single target, she's going to find it quite difficult to gain charges. That is where Anaxa comes in. He's the guy to basically fill in this niche where if it's only single target, the bounce as well as the additional steal, it can all focus into one target. Whereas Jade is, I feel like as a unit that she amplifies DHIL's strength. So DHIL performs very well against mod-based content, and Jade will make that perform even better. So these two, 1+1 is going to be even greater than 2. Whereas for Anaxa, it's like Anaxa raises DHIL's damage floor against single target, and then Jade increases DHIL's damage ceiling against AoE content, right? Both of these units, I don't think you can go wrong too much, but that is pretty much going to be it for Jade. Okay, Yunli. Ooh. First of all, Yunli, if you are going for fun, right? If you're somebody that wants to have fun and a unit that is like no other, right? She is a one of the kind. She is a one-of-the-kind unit, right? If you want to try this whole counter mechanic playstyle, there's no other unit HSR that can fulfill this niche as well as Yunli. Unfortunately, this is not a tier list based on how fun it is to play. This is a tier list on is it a must, right? So because of this, I'm gonna be parking Yunli in the niche category, same as Jade as well, right? Her whole playstyle, it is very, very fun. And she has shown to perform exceptionally well, even without any of the high cost supports, right? Till this day, Yunli has a benefit, which she performs well with both version 1, version 2, and even version 3 supports. And I feel like this is a benefit that some version 2 DPS or even version 3 DPS couldn't really fully utilize, because what this does, especially if you're a new player, if you want to play with Yunli, you can pretty much just make her work, slap on an RMC, and then that second support, it could be Sunday, it could be Babin, it could be Tribbie, it could be a lot of different units, or even team, right? And you could still make Yunli perform pretty decently. And in terms of vertical investment, her signature icon and E1, they're both very good. For the sustain, unfortunately, HweHwe is going to be the best in store. I can't really think of another DPS or other support that can fulfill this Yunli's energy shortfall, especially when I combine the best in store team, which is basically going to be HweHwe plus Babin plus RMC, right? Outside from that, her damage is very nice. You can use her in pretty much any of the game. Okay, if you guys play Epic 7, I think she might be a little bit like Ravi. Alright, she's a unit that performs very well. She's not that fixated on the team comps, and she's sort of like a jack of all trades, and she could be a master in them, maybe not to the highest degree of caliber. So that is gonna be Yunli. And then moving on, next is gonna be Feixiao. Damn, I love my wife, man. I love my wife, but you know what? I'll bug in the same vein, right? I'll bug in the same vein as Acheron. The reason why I say this is because just like Acheron, Feixiao as a whole, the entire follow-up archetype, it will depend on the Topaz slot. Topaz doesn't depend on Feixiao, or rather, Feixiao doesn't depend on Topaz, but Topaz is sort of like linked to Feixiao, right? So in the future, if they were to release like either a better Robin, which is like almost unimaginable, or a better Topaz, I can foresee Feixiao getting a bump up. Just like how for Acheron, they release a better Pella, right? Potentially in the form of Cypher, or like a better Sustain, right? It might be a little bit more difficult for Feixiao specifically, because Aventurine and Babin, these two are really super synergistic for your follow-up team comp. So really the only wriggle room left for Feixiao is gonna be the Topaz slot. So if she does find like another unit that could let go of like more follow-up attacks, more damage, more utility than Topaz, then Feixiao as a whole, the entire team comp, it could stand to gain a lot. But for that, we kind of have to see if there is another unit that could replace that Topaz slot. So for now, I'm gonna punish her damage caliber is gonna be very high. She has performed very well even against like previous MOC of Chaos, such as Nikado Avocado, right? Nikado, Wall of Strife. You had to break the wall pillars. Feixiao's like, fuck that shit, I'm just gonna go all in and can still do a tremendous amount of damage to the main target. So that's gonna be that for Feixiao in around the same category as Acheron, right? So that's gonna be that. Okay, Lingsha. I would say she's a good pool. I almost wanted to drop her down to niche, mainly because of the competition with Gallagher, right? And I know there's this meme going on about imagine saying that Gallagher can power creep Lingsha. Imagine saying that, okay, and we have so many different Lingsha showcase, which is true, by the way, which is true. Lingsha herself, she has a shit ton of toughness bar damage. She works very well. You can literally like a sustainless Lingsha, where Lingsha is your DPS, and it works. You can run a crit DPS Lingsha. So because of all these other variants where her use is not just tied to sustaining, you could have fun and play DPS. I'm gonna chug it up in the good pool here, but just keep in mind that if you're pulling for Lingsha outside of break DPS, you may find other options, such as, for example, Hyacinth, which at the end of the day, Hyacinth is gonna be giving units like HweHwe, Lingsha, all these abundance units a run for the money in terms of the competition involved, because at the end of the day, you really just, like I said, 2 sustains is all you need. Until the day they introduce 3-team content, right? Until the day they introduce 3-team content, I would say that Lingsha for now, it is still a pretty decent pool. Especially for somebody, you want to use Gallagher in another team, then you can still use Lingsha for the other team. Then I think that is still fine, right? So for the Lingsha, still works very well with Herta. She can still work pretty decently with Castorice, because every single time she does the dragon, it's a free bunny proc, right? Somewhat similar to Aventurine, except that Lingsha technically synergizes better with our current version 3 big boys, which is going to be Mydei as well as Castorice. But outside from that, we kind of have to see what Hyacinth is to offer. If Hyacinth really offers a shit ton of utility, I could foresee both Lingsha and HweHwe going down. So, but for that, we need to see what Hyacinth is to offer, right? Okay, Sunday. I will give Sunday a good pool, right? Even though there was this whole meme where like Sunday doesn't work with Castorice, all that kind of stuff, but people might be forgetting that he still works with pretty much almost every other hyper carry DPS, and he can still technically work with RMC. If you are Jing Yuan main, you have to have Sunday. If you're an Aglaea main, you not have to, but it is very, very good pool. If you are Jing Yuan, if you are Aglaea, or if you are any of the crit DPS of version 1, if you want to run, like, for example, Herta, you can also run Sunday. If you want to run a Sunday wheelchair, you can run Sunday, right? To a certain extent, you could even run Sunday with like Acheron and Feixiao, just because of the fact that you get so much buffs, and no other action value advancers can give you as many specific turns for DPS, because for Babin, it is a team-wide, but it is once every single cycle at a fixed 90 speed, whereas Sunday, it is basically the Bronya Pro Max, right? The only downside right now Sunday has is that he potentially could face competition not with Remembrance Trailblazer, but with the 5-star Remembrance Trailblazer, right? When a 5-star Remembrance Trailblazer comes out, that's when I'm gonna be a little bit more concerned for Sunday. But by the time that rolls around, it should be like, I don't know when that's gonna be, but because we already seen a 5-star HMC that is Fugue, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a 5-star RMC that's gonna be the even better version of RMC. And if that's gonna be even better than RMC, I think Sunday can go down to the niche. But for now, I would say, especially if you are somebody that wants to play all of the old DPS, right? You want to play any of the old DPS, you want to play Aglaea, you want to play Mydei even, right? Sunday is going to be that guy. He's going to be that guy, and there really is no other competition when it comes to you want to give the absolute highest possible down damage, unless you are a Castorice main or a Super Break main, then you might not really need Sunday. And if you are a Boothill, you can also use Sunday. So for all those reasons, I'm going to charge Sunday in the Google category. And then Fugue, exact same scenario. Okay, you know what? This is sort of reminiscent. Okay, once again, they are not better or worse than other. But if you want to play break, right? If you want to play break, this is the must pool, right? I would say her value is so fucking strong. She's gonna be a must, even higher than Ruan Mei personally, because like between, let's just say you can only choose either Ruan Mei or Fugue, you get Fugue first. You get Fugue first, right? Because her actual toughness is just gonna be that important for you. I would say that if you are a break main, you just have to go. But because break is no longer the flavor of the month, and you have a lot of different alternative team comps outside of break, I wouldn't really foresee a scenario where you want to use Fugue. You could go for this very, very niche application where you run Fugue as an Acheron support. So you use Fugue's defense down buff, give that shit to Tribbie, and then every single time Tribbie does a follow-up attack, you get this 1 stick of defense down because Fugue gave the... It could work. It is not the best, but it could still work. But outside from that, 99% of the time, if you're pulling for a break DPS support, then it is going to be Fugue. So she's going to be that good. So both of these two units, I would say, they are going to be very, very good value. But it's still ultimately dependent on what sort of team comps are you building for your account, right? So that's going to be that. Okay, these DPSs, you know what? I'm going to chuck all 4 of them bang, bang, boom, boom, bang, right? Bang, bang, boom, boom, bang. Between these DPSs, Aglaea is the one that deals the highest damage right now. Aglaea has the perfect team right now. She's peaked. She has the perfect team of Sunday, Babin, HweHwe. Sustainless, Sunday, Babin, Tribbie. She is the highest possible theoretical damage ceiling we have right now. But we have a lot of potential upgrades for Herta and Castorice. Herta is going to be getting a Anaxa. Castorice is waiting for the, I guess, 4-star RMC. Alright, and both of them, they can make use of Tribbie as well as, I guess, Babin. Okay, so Castorice can make use of Babin, but Herta makes use of Babin. Castorice can make use of Tribbie. Aglaea, if you want to run double Babin and Tribbie, that's going to be there. But as of where it stands right now, Aglaea is going to be dealing the highest possible damage. But because you play a gacha game, it depends if you are somebody that's like always looking for it in the future, right? What's gonna come next? What's the next power creep? What's the stronger DPS gonna come out? Who are the better supports that can make our current DPS even stronger? So for example, if you put for Acheron, would you play Acheron because she's strong now, or would you play Acheron thinking, okay, we're gonna get a DHIL in the future, right? So it really depends on your own mental philosophy. There really isn't a wrong way, by the way, because it's HSR. It's not Epic 7, right? It's not fucking Warcraft, right? It's not StarCraft 2. It's not like Korean MMO RTS. There isn't a competitive ladder. So even if you're someone that, let's just say, I want to deal the absolute most satisfactory damage right now, then Aglaea is going to be a fine answer for you, right? But if you're someone that, okay, you're going to be a little more prospective, you want to see what happens in the next few years, because at the end of the day, it's 3 endgame content. It's Pure Vision, MOC, and Apex Shadows. It really does not matter what team you run, because any of these 3 units, or rather these 4 units, they clear endgame with no issues, right? Any of these units can clear. It really just depends on your personal preference. And I would say, at the end of the day, whichever of these units you find the most joy, the most fun, and I guess if your wallet allows, that should be your primary concern. It shouldn't be not whether they're gonna get power crept, because let's be real, every single unit eventually they're gonna find a combination somewhere one day or another, right? Unless even for supports, that shit is gonna inevitable, because Honkai Star Rail, you only have 2 teams. You have 2 teams, you have 3 end content, that's it. And I have a feeling, I've been saying this for so long, unless Honkai style adds more depth to the game, it will never be a game that can satisfy every single player because there's only 8 slots for your endgame content. And once those 8 slots are filled, there can only be those 8 that's like quote-unquote best in slot, right? So everyone else is gonna feel worse to play it. So until we get 3 team content or more endgame, it is gonna be a reality. So it really doesn't matter that much on who do you really pick. I will leave this to you. For me personally, right? For me personally, if I had to choose one, I love Aglaea. Right? Me personally, out of these 4 DPS, I mean, I skipped fucking Castorice on my main account. I skip her for my main account, right? I like Aglaea a lot, me personally, right? The Herta, however, because of the release of Anaxa, if you want to park it in the list, okay, I'm just gonna rank them all in under good pool. I'm gonna rank them all under good pool as of what we have right now, right? In me personally, something like this, me personally, right? But at this point, the 4 of them might as well be the exact same thing, because if you want to make them work, they can definitely work, and it really just depends on you player to player, right? If you like to see big ass fucking tits, it's gonna be Aglaea. You want to see a giant ass dragon, you want to see global passive, it's gonna be Castorice. The whole argument of whether or not Castorice is the mass pool because of a global passive, sure, it's a bit of a quality of life, but if you're using global passive as a precedent for future global passives, then I would want to see a even more diabolical global passive. Because me personally, this Castorice global passive, sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't change anything. 99% of the time, I don't even use it at all, even for my free-to-play account. So if a future global passive that is like even more disgusting, that's when I would actually rank this up. So for example, a global passive that gives you like a team-wide 10% rest down, that's gonna be way more impactful than this like baby Baidu, right? So that's what I think of this whole thing. So the 4 of them are gonna be around this caliber, but at the end of the day, really just depend on yourself what you would like, because you can't really go wrong with any of these DPS. And please remember that for right now, HSR, you need a DPS to start, right? You need a DPS to kickstart your journey in HSR, especially if you're a brand new player, right? You shouldn't be going for the mindset that I only pull for support, because while that could work in the long term, in the short term, it's gonna feel very, very, very annoying to play. You imagine running like Tribbie with Wind, Dunheng, Natasha, and Serval. Bro, it's gonna feel so bad, even though technically you put for a super strong unit, but because you lack the structure of the DPS right now, I personally don't think it's that worth it, because you're playing a gacha game, you're not investing in the stock market, right? Which brings us to the last 2 units. Anaxa, right? I will chuck Anaxa in the same caliber as Jade. Players should be going all in for Anaxa as a good pool, because of opportunity costs. Right, you do have Witness Implant, you do not have Rest Down, so you're not going to be dealing that much of a damage, which means that your Witness Implant that you're going to get for Anaxa, it really is just mainly for you to just break the enemy, in which that case is mainly the biggest positives to this, it's going to be from APOC Shadows. And most of the time, you should already be using on-element DPS for APOC Shadows, right? So this elemental weakness, I would say is better for players that legit just started out and you cannot have the right element to that specific enemy weakness. Other than that, in MOC, all that kind of stuff, it really doesn't matter that much. The benefit for Anaxa is basically for Herta, right? It's gonna be performing better against a single target content. So around the same vein as Jade, I would say that's gonna be it. The Idolence for Anaxa also doesn't really scale that well. The E2 gives you the rest down, but it's fucking E2, which is like 3 different DPS. You're literally better off getting a E2 D Herta, running a baby Herta, than a E0 Herta and an E0 Anaxa, right? So that's gonna be my personal opinion, which brings us down to the final unit. If there can only be one, that's it. Alright, that's it. Alright, I'm not saying that Babin is like worse or whatever, but if there can only be one, this is it, right? This is the very, she is the glue. She is the Chovy. She is the faker. She is the mid lane. She is the MVP. She is the playmaker. She is the everything right now in HSR. If you can think of a content, a team, a unit that can make your team stronger, the answer 99.99% of the time is probably going to be Tribbie, unless you play Break, right? Unless you play Break, right? Tribbie is absolutely her. Every single environment has been catered towards her. Her follow-up attack, she works with every single team comp. She is basically what Babin was like in version 2, except she is the Babin of version 3, right? Between these two, if there can only be one, it's going to be Tribbie. But I would say that going forward in the future, it's still quite balanced, right? There's still quite a lot of attacks going DPS, right? D, Herta, Aglaea, they both still use Babin, and then Tribbie is going to be very good for Mydei and as well as Castorice, which is why these 2 units, you can get both, and then you run Tribbie with the either Mydei or Castorice side, and then you run Herta with the Castorice, or rather the Herta. Sorry, you run Barbin with Herta or the Aglaea side, right? And everything else, you want to run an Acheron, you want to run Super Ray, all that kind of stuff. That's gonna be up to you. But I would say that these two units, they are gonna be very, very good pools, very, very good vertical investment. This is gonna be very well with DDD. Barbin, I would say if you don't have a Synergy Light Cone, you could still use Bronya's Synergy Light Cone just to feel the energy downtime a little bit, but do keep in mind that in terms of this ability to utilize the kit, right, Barbin is gonna feel a little bit worse without the E2 or the S1, because lagging the energy required to cast the ultimate at 100% uptime, it will feel very, very bad. Whereas for Tribbie, you really don't feel this at all for now, because you're getting this ultimate so frequently that you will almost never run out of numerosity, right? So because of that, okay, yeah, if there can only be one unit, it is going to be Tribbie, right? But if there can be two, I'll chuck it as this. And this is going to be my list. I have not read a single chat. I know there has been war or whatever, disagreement. Feel free to discuss this. And this is going to be my personal opinions on who should we be pulling for after HSR second anniversary, which just happened 2 days ago, right? So, well, today it's going to be tier list. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter, all the best. See you guys time. Take care.